In April 1996, engineer Anatoliy left his native Odessa for Bangkok. This trip was planned as another overseas business trip, which was not supposed to last more than a few months. However, shortly after his arrival, Anatoliy was enslaved and forced to spend a long 14 years in captivity. If you're ready, dear ones, then sit back and get comfortable, because this is undoubtedly terrifying. Thank you. After Natalia Vdovichenko's father disappeared, she never stopped trying to find him. However, the search was complicated because there was no Ukrainian embassy in Thailand where Anatoliy had gone. When it finally appeared in 2002, Anatoliy's trail was completely lost, and it seemed that his fate would forever remain a mystery to his family. In October 2010, 14 years after Vdovichenko vanished, Natalia got a note. It said that the woman's father was alive. He was being held against his will at one of the local factories in Bangkok, and he needed help. Although there was little information, the author of the letter provided the address of the factory and a phone number through which Anatoliy could be contacted. When Natalia called that number, she heard her father's voice for the first time in many years. Let's go back a little, to the time when Anatoliy was still living in Odessa and had no idea about the difficulties that would soon come his way. This is necessary to better understand this story. So, in 1996, Vdovichenko turned 43 years old. He was married and, with his wife Tetiana, raised two daughters, 15-year-old Natalia and 8-year-old Marina. The man was an engineer at the Odessa-based Kislorodmash enterprise. Anatoliy had frequently traveled abroad on business since the Soviet era. He first went to Thailand back in the 1980s. He spent 3 years there, taking his wife and eldest daughter with him. The younger daughter was born during that trip. While living in Thailand, he quickly learned Indonesian, and besides, he could say a few sentences in Thai as well. After returning home, the experienced language-speaking man was later sent to Thailand again. This trip went quite smoothly. So, when in 1996 they decided to send him again to the country he had already visited several times, the man gladly agreed. Work is work. He also expected to stay in Thailand for no more than 3 months. But you see, fate decided otherwise, although at first everything was going well. As Anatoliy said, nothing suggested trouble was coming. He arrived at the same factory he had worked with during his first trip. Just before his return to his homeland, there was a fire at the factory, as a result of which Anatoliy suffered serious burns to his face and right hand. As a result, his return home was delayed. According to the man, at that time he fell into a serious depression and was worried that his appearance would now be permanently damaged by the burns. It was during this time, when Anatoliy's emotional state was quite vulnerable, that the owner of another company approached him and offered him some work. Vdovichenko agreed to the cooperation, thinking that a few extra months of work in Thailand would ultimately be a great opportunity to recover and get back to normal psychologically before returning home to his family. In addition, the owner of the company who offered the engineer the job made a good impression on him, and the offer of cooperation itself looked really attractive. Anatoliy was promised a monthly salary of 30,000 baht, which if converted to dollars at that time was about 930. And let me remind you, these events took place in 1996. For Ukraine, that amount of salary sounds good even now, and back then it was really impressive. And besides that, Vdovichenko was also promised housing, a company car, and medical insurance. Overall, the conditions were excellent. However, Anatoliy didn't manage to get official permission to work at the new company. Because of this, the agreements were never put in writing. The men and the boss agreed that while this issue was being resolved, everything between them would be based on verbal promises. Bad idea. For the next 3 months, Anatoliy worked and received his salary regularly, as well as all the promised bonuses. But soon after, at the beginning of 1997, the owner of the company started delaying payments, and later stopped paying anything at all. Anatoliy decided to discuss it with his boss, Mr. Sak. Mr. Sak assured the employee things would be resolved soon, but first Vdovichenko had to hand over his passport, so that Mr. Sak could arrange a work permit for Anatoliy as quickly as possible. The engineer agreed. The boss did make the documents for him, but Vdovichenko never saw them, just like he never saw his passport. Soon, Mr. Sek informed the worker that the housing provided to him by the company was going to be sold. So, Anatoly would be temporarily relocated to the factory grounds. From that moment, Dovichenko's life was forever changed. Now, he became completely dependent on his employer and was essentially enslaved by him.
He forced me to live in a shabby trailer at the factory and forbade me to leave the premises. Then the threats of physical violence began. They even put a gun to my head.
According to the man, the place he moved into had nothing for a comfortable or even normal life. He even had to build a bed himself using rebar and whatever materials he could find. Meanwhile, Mr. Sak forbade the worker from calling or trying to contact his family in any other way. To make sure of this, the employer assigned men to the Ukrainian to watch him around the clock. From time to time, he was allowed to go outside, but only to the nearest kiosk or grocery store. Even then, only with the so-called supervisors. They were supposed to make sure the engineer didn't escape or accidentally say something he shouldn't to anyone. Once a month, Anatoly was given money for food and cigarettes. The amount was about $30, not even close to $900. At the same time, Vodovichenko was forced to work almost around the clock, sometimes up to 20 hours a day. In addition to his direct duties, he also had to repair equipment, which was quite old and therefore broke down often. He worked as a tinner, locksmith, and electrician. In other words, now Mr. Sak used the man for almost all the work that was needed at the enterprise. Despite such harsh working conditions, she fed Anatoly only once a day. In the morning, he could have coffee but no fruit, even though fruit was much cheaper in Thailand than in Ukraine. Overall, he had to eat local spicy dishes. Mostly, it was plain rice and very hot spices. Although sometimes they even gave him meat. As the man said, during the first 2 years, he lived with a constant feeling of hunger, but over time he got used to eating little and adapted so much to the conditions he found himself in that sometimes he could work for several days in a row without proper food or sleep. In order not to forget the language, he tried to read. He had a few books. In his free time, the man kept rereading them, but Mr. Sak noticed this and got very angry. The slave owner wanted to break Vodovichenko's will and completely cut him off from the outside world. He ordered his men to destroy all the books and notes Anatoly kept in captivity. In nearly 15 years, Vodovichenko never attempted to escape. He said he had depression before captivity. However, during captivity, it hit him with renewed force, which is completely understandable. But there were other reasons as well. Mr. Saku intimidated the man so persistently that he eventually stopped considering escape. At first, Anatoly thought about escaping, but he quickly came to the conclusion that the idea was not a good one and that he wouldn't succeed. First of all, the man knew that his guards were armed. They had fired into the air more than once to scare Vdovichenko. Anatoly saw these shots as a warning that if he tried to escape, they'd shoot at him instead of the sky. Secondly, Vdovichenko thought that there was neither a Ukrainian consulate nor an embassy in Thailand. That was true. It only opened in 2002. But Anatoly didn't know, as he had been in slavery for over 5 years with no contact with the outside world. He was afraid to go to the local police because he didn't have any money or documents with him. Vdovichenko was convinced that the police, after hearing his story, would simply send him back to the factory. And after that, his time in slavery would just become much worse. So, the years dragged on like that. According to Vdovichenko, every day of his was the same as the previous one. And eventually, the man completely lost any hope for freedom.
I lost hope of rescue and began preparing for death.
The only thing that helped Anatoly hold on was thinking about his family, who stayed in Ukraine. He remembered his parents, his wife, his sister, and his daughters. And he tried to imagine what they look like now and how they live now, many years after his disappearance. Meanwhile, in Odessa, Anatoly's wife, Tetiana, decided to divorce him and start a new life just 6 months after her husband disappeared. Is it true that at first she still tried to find out what happened to her husband? The woman visited Kislorodmesh several times, hoping to learn something about the fate of her husband Anatoly. However, she did not receive any answers to her questions about where he had gone. Later, Anatoly's mother, Halina, who lived in the city of Korystinivka in the Cherkasy region, received a letter from an unknown person.
Things didn't work out between Anatoly and me. We should go our separate ways, so we need to get a divorce. I'm planning to get married. While Anatoly is away, we will live in our apartment. And when Anatoly comes back, then we'll figure out how all of us can move out.
After that, the communication between Tatiana and Anatoly's mother stopped. Halina also didn't keep in touch with her granddaughters. According to the woman, she and her husband, Vdovichenko's father, often wrote to them, but in all 14 years they never received a reply. During all this time, Halina and her husband were searching for their son. They felt that he was alive. When he disappeared, his mother reported it to Cherkasy police, but they told her to go to Odessa. Since Anatoly was registered elsewhere, because of their health condition, neither Halina nor Anatoly's father could do it. But despite this, the woman repeatedly turned to television, to a television program that searched for missing people. But it was in vain. Time passed and the parents never received any news about their son. Their health deteriorated greatly due to constant worry. Halina's husband, trying to calm her down, tried to convince his wife that Anatoly was a young man who had decided to start his life from scratch. Right now, he just doesn't have time for them, but he will definitely come back. However, Halina knew her son would never do that to his family. She felt that something had happened to him, but to do something about it, with that feeling, she couldn't do anything. Besides his parents, Anatoly was also being searched for by his sister, Miss Olha, and his older daughter, Natalia. Despite all their efforts, they also couldn't find out any information about the man's whereabouts. The years passed slowly, and Anatoly's family nearly lost hope he would be found. Imagine, it's been over 10 years. During his captivity, Anatoly became friends with two brothers from Burma, a country located in Southeast Asia. These brothers also worked for Pansak, but they did so of their own free will. They got a job at the company when Vdovichenko had already been in slavery for about 7 years. He and Johnny, as the brothers were called, were still very young guys when they started working for Pansak. Anatoly said they quickly connected, and the engineer changed, becoming almost like a father to them. So, in the fall of 2010, he and Johnny decided to leave Bangkok and return home. They knew that Anatoly was being kept at work by force. Before they left, they gave him a cell phone, asked for his home address in Odessa, and promised to help. These guys sent the letter with Anatoly's contact info, which his daughter Natalia later got. On Vdovichenko's birthday, he received a call on his cell phone, which he had to hide from Pansak. A woman's voice spoke to the man on the other end. Anatoly hadn't heard either Ukrainian or Russian for a long time. He was very surprised when someone addressed him in Russian, so he asked again in English, "Who?"
It's me, your daughter.
Hearing such an answer, Anatoly couldn't hold back his tears. According to him, he felt that at that moment he was coming back to life. After speaking with her father, Natalia quickly contacted law enforcement and Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They created a full plan to return Anatoly to Ukraine. Employees of the Ukrainian embassy in Thailand secretly contacted the man. At the same time, they turned to the Bangkok police. Everything was done in secret. There were concerns that Mr. Sak, upon learning about the operation, might harm Anatoly or even get rid of him. Anatoly's mother wasn't told her son was found until the last moment. The relatives were afraid that the woman's heart simply wouldn't be able to take it, so they decided to tell her everything only after the man was safe. As Anatoly said, in late December 2010, when people in Ukraine knew about his captivity, Mr. Sak took him to an abandoned building. The engineer said he didn't know his boss's intentions but was very afraid for his life. At that moment, he told Mr. Sak about his cooperation with the embassy and that the police were aware of his situation.
Mr. Sak turned pale. It was clear that he was scared. He immediately started saying that he had never kept me by force. He stated that I was free. Then I asked him to pay me for all the years I had worked and to return my documents. He immediately gave me $10,000 and said that he would give me the rest later. He said that my passport was currently in his office. The next day, he brought documents for me to sign. They were all in Thai, and I couldn't translate them. I refused to sign. He got angry, but he gave me back my passport. I saw that my visa was expired and that Mr. Sak had never renewed it. Mr. Sak already understood that it was the end and allowed me to leave. That's how I found myself free. I never set foot on the factory grounds again, not even when journalists asked me to, wanting to film a story. I got goosebumps just thinking about having to go back in there.
On January 11, 2011, Anatoliy arrived at the embassy of Ukraine. He had an expired passport and the money Mr. Sak had given him. Later, the man filed a report with the police. The Thai friends he once worked with rented an apartment for him in Bangkok. While the slavery case is investigated,
Vdovichenko is currently in Thailand. He is renting accommodation near the Ukrainian embassy and is practically in constant phone contact with our consul. Anatoly filed a report with the police where he will seek protection of his rights and interests in court, which have been violated for 14 years.
On January 21, a court hearing took place, but not in the slavery case. It was related to the fact that Anatoly was actually staying in the country illegally from 2006 to 2011. The embassy and the Honorary Consul of Ukraine in Thailand took part in the process, and thanks to their work, the man was allowed to stay in the country during the investigation of the case. However, he had to pay a fine of $300. Otherwise, he would have faced imprisonment or deportation. After that, Anatoly planned to sue Pansak. He wanted to get compensation from him in the amount of $200,000 for all those years when he didn't receive proper wages.
If you consider the $15,000 the company owner promised him for 15 years of work, it amounts to almost nothing, and he only paid about $10,000. Therefore, the citizen of Ukraine has every reason to defend his rights in court. I can't say what amounts are being discussed, but I want to emphasize that the Ukrainian embassy and the consul will provide all the necessary assistance.
However, according to Vdovichenko, the case did not go to court because his former employer intimidated all the employees. They refused to testify in favor of Anatoly, so the man had no choice but to sign a settlement agreement with Pansak. According to it, the former boss had to pay the engineer an additional $8.5 thousand on top of the $10,000. In May 2011, the agreement was signed, and Anatoly began preparing to return to his homeland. The story is told from Vdovichenko's perspective, based on interviews he gave after his release. Neither the Thai press nor his employer Pansak commented on the official account. The Asian police are generally convinced that no one held Vdovichenko by force, although they agree that his passport was indeed taken away. However, law enforcement says Anatoly worked like everyone else. He lived in a dorm and could move freely around the city. Mr. Vdovichenko made up this whole story because he knew well that he had broken the country's law by not having an official work permit, and now he's trying to justify himself this way. The police also emphasized the fact that Mr. Vdovichenko was not working for free. He was given $30 to $60 a week. Anatoly himself partially confirms this fact in his interviews. But I assure you, the money was given once a week, and it was only enough for food. In addition, the website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine states that in 2010, when embassy staff first contacted Anatoly, he did not express a desire to return to Ukraine and did not make any complaints about his boss. Only after Anatoly was repeatedly told that his family was waiting for him at home did he finally agree to return, and for the first time revealed that he had been held at work against his will all this time. Agreeing sounds a bit strange, but it can be attributed to stress, fear, depression, or perhaps a loss of hope for rescue. On June 7, 2011, 58-year-old Anatoly Vdovichenko arrived at Borispil airport. He was greeted by his sister and mother, but his father had died a year before he returned to Ukraine. After returning to his homeland, Anatoly moved to the village of Kristinivka, where he settled in a house with his mother. That's today's story, dear ones. Take care of yourselves, your family, and loved ones. Thanks for watching until the end. You're the best. See you next video. Thanks.